Our Perspective segment today takes a closer look at the state of modern language learning here in France. Our guest, a former English teacher turned European journalist and public speaker, has just finished co-researching and writing a new report for the French government on how the learning of a second language, especially English, can and should be made better nationwide. Alex Taylor joins me here in the studio. Thank you very much for coming in to talk to us here on France 24. First of all, how did this report come about and how did you go about researching and writing it?
Well, the French government is looking at ways to teach various subjects differently. There's already been a report about maths, and they got in touch with an inspector who's been working in the system for 30 years, and me, who comes a bit from the outside. I taught English in France when I arrived here in the 80s for 10 years, and since I've been a journalist, I've written a book about languages, and so they asked us to have a look at the way languages are taught, and also we went to other countries to see how languages are taught in the Netherlands, in Ireland, in Spain and in Portugal.
The French have in the past often got a bit of stick for maybe performing a little bit more badly compared to their European counterparts. Is that fair?
I don't think so. I think that language learning depends very much. I mean, I was very lucky because I was taught languages in Britain in the 60s by people who had great passion. It depends on the teachers. There are good teachers, bad teachers everywhere. We saw some very good language teaching in France. We also got rid of some of the stereotypes. For example, the Dutch. Everybody says the Dutch are very good at learning languages because they have programs with subtitles. But it's kind of also because Dutch is very similar to English, so it's much easier for them to learn languages. The one thing I would say, which I found in the 80s, and which is less so in France now, is the system does rather discourage people in France, because it's very much, it used to be, it is changing, it used to be a system where you take off marks for mistakes. So you have this 20 mark, which is perfection, and you take away marks if you make a mistake of grammar, if you make a spelling mistake and so forth. And that's not the way people learn languages. Well, I'm sure when you were young, when you were a baby, as soon as you started opening your mouth, your parents didn't kind of go to you and say, no, that's a big mistake. They said, wow, that's fantastic. And languages are such a kind of important thing to learn early. So the French system of subtracting marks was, and to a lesser extent now, is still used a little bit in a negative way. So that is one of the aspects that we did recommend, that system should be a bit different. But the French are no more or less good at learning languages. It depends on how good your teacher is.
Just 5 years ago, though, one study found that 10% of French students actually struggle with the learning of their mother tongue. Shouldn't, in your view, more resources be pumped into improving French teaching before the government thinks about improving the teaching of a second language?
Well, you find that in every country. I mean, if you go to any country, you find that people have trouble with their mother tongue. Once again, it depends who teaches them and how it's taught. One thing that we did suggest, I was a bit surprised because I've been away from the education world for about 30 years, and I came back and I was a bit surprised. For example, we went into a lesson where some 11-year-olds were being taught Shakespeare. I mean, that's great. It's fantastic. But when we came out, this young student suddenly got onto her phone and was watching a YouTube or Netflix or something. She actually whispered to me, she didn't want her teacher to hear. She said, well, now I'm really going to learn some real English because this is what I'm interested in, watching The Crown or whatever she was watching on Netflix. And I was a bit surprised to see that people don't use these fantastic resources. I mean, if I'd have had that when I was learning languages, you know, I learned German by listening to Marlene Dietrich songs, but it was difficult to get hold of them and everything. Now you just have to go on your phone and you can watch, especially English, but you can watch other languages too.
Why has your focus been on English teaching rather than other languages? There's been some focus on maybe Arabic being more widely taught in French schools.
I don't think you're right, actually. I don't think we did put an emphasis. I mean, for example, I was very insistent that all languages should be done. I mean, it is true that English does have this role in the world. I spend my time hosting international conventions, and if you don't speak English, it's difficult to get along. But we very much insisted that people should be not only bilingual, but multilingual. We went, for example, to the Saarland in Germany, which in 2014, it's not a very economically favoured region, but in 2014 they took the political decision that everybody in Saarland was going to be multilingual. So we went into creche where young babies, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, hear songs, nursery rhymes in English, French and German. The thing about language learning is that you can learn them all well if you learn before the age of 11. After about 11 or 12, the human brain closes down, so you don't learn languages as easily, and you don't learn them in the same way. You don't learn them as mother tongues. That's why, for example, I've been in France for 40 years, but I've still got an accent because I learned it after the age of 11. So what we were suggesting is that you should take advantage of this period when children in each country we went to, we heard the same word, sponges. They're sponges. They kind of like can just pick up anything. I have a godchild. She's now 15. She grew up in a perfectly trilingual environment. Her mother spoke German, her father spoke English. She grew up in France, and she has not only three native languages, but three cultures. And so I think if we can early on encourage people to learn as many languages as possible, obviously with importance given to English, but we do insist in the report that other languages too. The thing is that people shouldn't have the impression that their language is a handicap for them. We should encourage people to think of their language, whatever it is, as a richness.
Now, when I was in school, as we were talking about earlier, I was told personally that learning a second language was crucial if I wanted to climb the job ladder, and especially given that the UK was becoming part of Europe. Is that still the case? Given that in March next year Brexit will happen, is English still the language that Europe should learn?
My life has been made infinitely richer because I love languages. I was lucky enough to have language teachers who believed in what they were talking, who transmitted their passion of learning languages to me. I love speaking foreign language. I met somebody actually in Britain who said to me, really, it was a Spanish woman, and she'd been in a park and she was talking Spanish to her child. And somebody who knew the family came up to her and said, "You should not speak Spanish, you're confusing the child." And the woman said back to her, and I think she's absolutely right, said, "I'm not confusing her, I'm opening windows for her." Learning a foreign language is not only about learning grammar and so forth, it's actually opening your mind to other ways of thinking about things, to other ways of doing things, to other cultures. And also on purely economic terms, if you want to sell somebody what you're producing, if you actually talk to them in their own language, you get them much more than if you force them to talk to you in your own language. I mean, I speak a bit of Dutch, and I can tell you, the Dutch, if you talk Dutch to people, they're kind of like, wow, you've made the effort to come a little bit into my world. And also, you see the world differently. You know what it's like if you speak a different language. It's a way of opening up your own world.
Okay, Alex Taylor, we have to leave it there. Thank you very much for coming and talk to us and being today's Perspective guest. Thank you very much.